We're live and recording now.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody to the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee of the 1st of December 2020. This is our last scheduled COVID-19 Relief and Recovery meeting for this year, and if things go well, potentially for a long time. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I can see that we have all members here, so we don't have any apologies or members on leave of absence. And I'll just inquire as to whether we have had any public questions submitted.
View Mayor Cole, no, none received.
Okay, thank you. Response to previous questions taken on notice. I see there are none in the agenda, none received last month. Okay, any declarations of interest, committee members? No declarations of interest. And I don't believe we need to deal with applications for leave of absence, given that we have no meetings moving forward scheduled. So that takes us to item 6, confirmation of minutes for the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee meeting of the 3rd of November 2020. Could I please have a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes? Move Councillor Gondaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle. Thank you very much. We'll all vote. The minutes are adopted. Thank you very much. That brings us to business arising. The first item on the agenda is 7.1 COVID-19 monthly update. Could I have a mover and seconder for the item, please? Moved by Councillor Castle, seconded by Councillor Gondaszewski. Councillor Castle, do you have any comments or questions?
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a question. I'm just wondering if the Acting Executive Director could give us an update on the next phase and the contact tracing requirements that our businesses are going to have this in this next phase.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. So the contact tracing requirements come into effect on the 5th of December, which is in 5 days' time. The purpose of this is for businesses and community facilities to have contact tracing mechanisms in place, which is one of the main options is the QR code system introduced by the WA government. We at the City of Vincent have been invited to a seminar on this from the Department of Health to get further information. That's not happening until Thursday because they're still developing the legal instrument to determine how this will be implemented. So we are working through that within our facilities and working out what sort of communications we'll be having with our businesses as well.
Thank you. And also just to note, it's good to see that some groups have been able to get their event plan approvals through. I'm just wondering, has that been a particularly onerous task for them, or is it relatively straightforward going forward?
Through you, Mayor Cole, to be perfectly honest, the task is really quite a detailed task. It's taking event organisers a lot of time. It's also taking our officers a lot of time to actually assess and do the correct risk assessment of these events, particularly in the lead up to Christmas when everybody wants to just run an event. And it is quite a challenging time for stakeholders in the event industry and those who have to approve it as well.
And is that something that we think is here to stay for a while, those requirements?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I would say so. I would say that the mechanisms that we've got in place to manage COVID are really just to put us in good stead in case there is a potential for a second wave to occur. So that's why these systems are in place.
Thank you. That's all the questions I had, and really just wanted to reiterate what we've said before, to thank administration for the exemplary work that they've done in getting us through this phase, and certainly in supporting this committee through some pretty challenging and fast-paced changes. So really thank you for all of the work you've done on that, and I look forward to how we're going to work our way through the economic rebound plan in the future.
Thank you very much, Councillor Castle. Wholeheartedly agree with you there. Councillor Gontaszewski, do you have any comments or questions?
Just to note the ongoing increase in the business e-newsletter circulation, I think that this is, there's a number of initiatives that have come out of the COVID space that are going to be really beneficial for the city ongoing. And I think a sort of dynamic planning and some of our engagement with our stakeholders has certainly just taken a new tack, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Gontaszewski. Yes, I'll put the motion then. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 7.2. Which is the Arts Relief Working Group Closure Report. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just have a couple of questions in relation to the wording of the recommendation. Note that recommendation 3 is that the COVID committee delegate the action in relation to the major public artwork. And I was just wondering, thank you. Sorry, I was wondering who we were delegating to. There was some correspondence about this that referenced delegation, and I must have misread it. Okay, so in terms of the $100,000 recommended to be set aside for the percent for art for COVID, is that something that the committee needs to delegate, or is that is that something that could just be wiped and that could go to council for delegation should advice be received in relation to the, I guess, feasibility of future pandemic-related arts projects? Just wondering in terms of that model of setting, sort of, I guess, specifically earmarking that funds.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, the discussion at the Arts COVID Relief Committee was that they wanted to formally close out the arts relief piece of work, but they also wanted to make sure that when we effectively hand the money back, that it doesn't sort of get fully spent on other arts projects, but there's recognition of the fact that this particular program of work was useful during a COVID pandemic phase, and that we should be conservative and I suppose just at least in the short term, quarantine some money in case we needed to go through another process again. So that was really the intent, is just to kind of say, look, while we're still in this COVID world, it would be good for us to sort of say at least 100 grand is set aside in case we wanted to reinitiate a similar project. In terms of the recommendation point 3, I think that was really just about noting that the rebound plan action probably couldn't be, they are recommending that it's not necessary within the context of COVID and within the context of the rebound plan, and noting that we've had other conversations about artworks and we'll deal with that as a separate matter.
Nothing further from me.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Yes, I have a couple of concerns with how this is set out. I think obviously in complete agreement that we're wrapping up this program, and I certainly don't have any problem with items 1 and 2. I am concerned about item number 3 because I don't think that was really the discussion that we landed on at the workshop, and I think there was still an desire to explore a medium scale public artwork through this process. So I'm not really supportive of deleting that action as it stands there. I think that I would be more comfortable if that referred to changing major public artwork to something like medium scale town centre artwork, whether that is something that can happen through amendment by amendment or through an alternative. We'll have to work that out. So that's really my first concern, because I do think there is still some benefit in this COVID relief project in providing or in seeing through that some form of that phase 2 of the project, which was to provide some extra benefit to the arts community and to spread that community benefit through medium scale, smaller artworks across the city, as opposed to one large artwork in one location. Yes, sure.
Yes,
I might just ask when to put the recommendation on the screen, because I think we might be doing some amendments to it. Wendy, could you screen share that?
so through you, Mayor Cole, I think it was strongly the Arts Relief Working Group felt strongly that the idea of doing some medium-sized artworks within the town centres, while it might be a good aim, it would be easily picked up as an action through the Arts Development Action Planning and through our Arts Advisory Group. They didn't see a direct connection with COVID relief. And in actual fact, they were saying once you get to $40,000, $50,000 commissions, we would go more broadly than the local community in terms of the artists groups that would be invited. And they didn't necessarily see that it would drive an immediate return to COVID impacted businesses or town centres. So it was the Arts Relief Group felt very strongly in the context of COVID that that particular piece of work was not going to be beneficial in their opinion. What they would like to do is to pick it up as part of the Arts Development Action Plan. And what that group is doing is looking at place-based, looking at the town centre plans and looking at how we can integrate art into those plans. So that's where they feel is the more appropriate place to do that. And at the next meeting of the Arts Advisory Group, they're going to revise the first of those town centre plans as an Arts Advisory Group and talk about opportunities. So I think it's really just the intent is right, but in the context of the rebound plan and COVID, their view was that it wasn't the right place for it.
Thank you for that clarification. I guess the question then, which sort of leads to my questions on the next one, is how we're setting aside funds for this, because we have currently got funds set aside. And I will wait for other comment on that, but as to whether it is necessary to retain this funding for that phase 2, or whether that can be achieved through the Arts Advisory Group and the Arts Development Plan. In relation to item 4, I probably it's a similar question to Councillor Gontaszewski's in terms of reserving within a reserve, which is really what we're looking to do here. And I'm not really convinced that it's necessary. I think that I can understand the reasoning for it, and that we do want to be in a position to act fast if there is another wave, and that we don't want to have expended all of those funds and have nothing left. Although I don't really see that as being particularly likely at this point. And I'm just not sure that this feels like a very unwieldy way around reserving within a reserve for something that is trying to see ahead into with a crystal ball. I'm not expressing myself very well here, I'm sorry. But I'm not sure that that's really required. And I think it's something that council could easily implement if we were faced with it. I mean, if the reality is, if we have a second wave and we're back in this room dealing with COVID relief, all of these mechanisms are going to be back in play. We're going to be setting aside sums of money for various things. The priorities in a second wave may be different to the first wave. And I'm just not sure that that's something that we necessarily need to do at this point. 4.2 to me is simply reflecting what the % for Art Special Reserve is going to do anyway. I don't think that that's necessary, but that's sort of neither here nor there. The other, yes, sure, sorry.
So through you, Mayor Cole, just to respond to those concerns, These
Hey,
recommendations,
excuse me, Director, I just want to check whether Councillor was finished before you respond.
no problem.
That's fine. I just have one more comment, but I'm happy for the Executive Director to respond on that point first.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. Some of these recommendations were articulated quite strongly by some of the elected members that were on the Arts Relief Group. And I suppose the recommendation 4.1 about setting aside $100,000, I actually agree with your comment, Councillor Castle, about the likelihood of us expending that money is low. But I suppose there was an intention there that, and I suppose a bit of risk mitigation that the Relief Working Group was concerned about. The 4.2, which is the remaining funds, are basically sort of not COVID related. The elected members were concerned that in the original recommendation, which says that we approve $500,000 for this purpose, that we actually had an alternate recommendation that kind of cancelled that out, just to really clarify that the money is going back into general purpose and it is no longer being preserved for COVID purposes. So it was really being very clear about that intention is the request around that recommendation.
Councillor Castle, have you still got remaining questions?
Just one last comment, and it's really just a comment on the report. I really appreciate the effort that's gone into those lessons learned, and I think that that's a really, really important piece of work because we were learning as we go with this process, and then we did have some challenges that if we were to try a project like this again, we could definitely address. But I did want to, I guess, make the note that in the successes, what seemed to be omitted was to me, the most important success is that the project actually achieved what it was set out to do, which was to support the arts community in Vincent from COVID impact, and that these other successes are probably more internal successes, but our external success was probably the most important thing, and I think that's really good to reflect on. I'll listen to the Mayor's comments in terms of how we might proceed forward with this item.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. I think you've raised some pretty valid issues there and things that I do agree with. I think when I read this recommendation, I felt that it hadn't really captured the direction that Council more broadly was seeking to go in with phase 2, which was to revert from the major public artwork to the medium scale town centre artworks, which was effectively announced as part of the COVID relief art relief grants. I do understand that this is no longer primarily in the category of art relief, but I think that it is still an important part of Vincent Rebound, and that it does have a place to play within the Vincent Rebound plan because of the fact that the art can add to that sense of vibrancy and interest and tourism, etc., within our town centres. So I understand that we're moving away from the immediate need for direct relief, but that I still see this as a component of Rebound and a strong addition to the Rebound plan. So I would favour clause 3 talking about approves the action, the deletion of the action as it's stated, but then replacing that with an action launch phase 2 brackets medium scale public. I can't move an amendment, so I'm just putting this out there as in terms of my contribution to the debate would be around medium scale artworks to be delivered within for the town centres, and they could be entry statements as discussed, but I think it needs to be a bit fluid to see what comes back. And I'd also like to see that a dollar figure not be put towards it in the Rebound plan, and that I think we really need to see an EOI come forward to council for approval with a bracket sort of amount, say $40,000 to $80,000. Obviously, we don't necessarily have to approve artworks for each town centre. It might be that we get 3 of varying scales that are of interest. but I certainly don't feel that the majority of council members wanted to let go of this at this stage. I did have some email correspondence with the working group, the Arts Relief Working Group committee, because I was a little bit confused when this recommendation came forward. And it appears that Councillor Smith and Councillor Fotakis are supportive of this mid-tier artwork EOI going forward. That's sort of based on discussions that we have had. So I also agree with Councillor with Councillor Castle that clause 4, I don't believe it's necessary. Council would be ultimately approving expenditure from the % for Art Special Purpose Reserve. So it remains open for us to allocate funds from that reserve to a point. I don't think that we're looking at expending the full $550,000. We've only spent just over $100,000 of that so far on the first stage of arts relief. And I think there's capacity in there to do the second stage and still have remaining funds either for a major artwork down the track or for further relief funds should that be necessary if we have a COVID stage 2 experience in Western Australia. So I would probably be considering quite significant amendments, supporting significant amendments to this motion, which could potentially just lead it to be an alternate because it would be quite different to what is proposed. It would be basically to launch phase 2 in a medium scale public centre artworks, and it would be to delete clause 4 as written, but to replace that with a clause requesting that an EOI and locations be brought forward to council for approval in February, but that prior to that happening, that advice is sought from the Arts Advisory Group on the EOI and the locations. So, so just seeking some governance advice on if, given that I've put that forward, should we deal with this as an alternate, and then if there's support for that, and deal with the officer recommendation before us, call a vote on it, and then if that doesn't pass, then seek to move an alternate motion?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the way I'm reading the discussion is that the overall intent of the report and the recommendation is the status update and the closure, and we're essentially now just dealing with a few of the implementation details of that. So I don't consider it, in the context of the overall report, I don't consider that a major change, and I think it can be dealt with by amendment to those recommendations because they are much smaller sub-elements of the overall report.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, as I can't move amendments, I'll leave my comments there and I'll see what happens. Thank you, CEO.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'd be happy to move that as an amendment, and perhaps we can just confirm that wording. Would you like me to do that before you second it or after?
I'll second on the, yeah, you probably.
Is there a seconder, Councillor Gontaszewski?
I'm happy for Councillor Castle to confirm their wording.
Yep, sure.
So I think the amendment should be to delete the word deletion and change that to amendment. So approves the amendment of the action entitled Launch Phase 2 and then delete the words major public and replace them with medium scale.
We still need to retain that, but put it, okay, sorry, I'll leave you to it. I'm just wondering whether you need to leave it as is and then explain further along what the new wording will be. Have the current wording and the new wording. Advice, CEO? Is it okay to proceed this way?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, I think we can just amend the wording of that because we can follow the history of it through the minutes of the discussion on this amendment from the original to the adopted amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Castle, please go ahead.
No, okay. I'm very grateful for any advice on wording as we go. I was going to say medium scale town centre artwork.
Is it plural?
Yes, medium scale town centre artworks. Yes, yeah. That's actually going to come into the next bit. Yeah.
So when do we just need an S on the end of artwork?
S on the end of artworks, please. So medium scale town centre artworks. Thank you. And then I've got to go back to the original. Delete clause 4. And insert a new clause 4 that says requests administration to prepare an EOI with proposed locations. Yeah, to invite. Grateful for advice at this point.
Do you want to just say proposed locations for the medium, was it medium?
Medium scale town centre artwork.
Locations for the medium scale town centre artworks.
Yeah. In consultation or with advice from the Arts Advisory Group. For presentation to council in February 2021. Is that I would prefer February if you think it's possible. Okay. Okay.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Is there
Sorry. We're just saying that February might be tricky in terms of getting the Arts Advisory Group together in enough time to prepare that for February. And
it'll be done out of session.
Yep.
And
Mayor Cole, I think the Arts Advisory Group are quite passionate about this particular initiative and would like to be heavily involved. So my only concern with February is that we would need to have the Arts Advisory Group come together in early January to make it into the February meeting round. So we were just suggesting that March would be a more realistic date to, really give the Arts Advisory Group the opportunity to participate.
Okay. Councillor Castle, any thoughts on that?
yeah, that's fine if it's not feasible by February. Perhaps we can just say no later than March, just in case you happen to get it done.
Are you happy with that wording, Councillor Castle?
Yes, happy with that.
Okay.
No,
Is there a
if I
seconder
had a
for the
seconder.
amendment?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I was just asking if there is a seconder for the amendment.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Castle?
I'll just briefly, I mean, we've really covered it. I think following from the discussion, I'm convinced that we really don't need to set aside $100,000 at this point. And I'm actually concerned that if we were facing a second wave, that it would be better if we're not locked into certain relief and that we would need to assess the impact at that time and allocate funds as required.
I just wish to speak to the amendment.
Yeah, I just have a question. It just occurred to me. Can I please get confirmation that the Vincent Rebound Plan is a COVID committee document and not a council document? Because otherwise I don't know if we have authority to approve a change to it. Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? I declare the amendment carried. We're back to the substantive. Are there any further comments on the substantive motion? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to item 7.3, expiry of terms of reference for COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle.
No, nothing really from me, except to just again say that I think that we've felt our way a little bit in the early stages of this group, and I appreciate that there's been, for administration, that has probably led to some multiple iterations. We've had lots of amendments and varying things through this group. I certainly have felt the benefit of briefing sessions, but at the same time, we have having regular meetings without a briefing cycle meant that we were able to be agile as things changed. And I just want to extend my thanks to everyone that's been involved in this process. I'm really happy that we are at a point where we can close this group off. As Mayor Cole said earlier, I hope we either never have to open it again or it's a really long time.
Thank you, Councillor Gontaszewski. Councillor Castle? No? Okay. Right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried. So that takes us to announcements by the presiding member. Really, I think they've been covered very well by Councillor Gontaszewski and Councillor Castle today, really just to see how far we have come and the work that has really been driven from this committee and by our administration. The COVID response was extremely quick and agile, and I know that there's been a huge amount of effort put into this by our teams. I particularly would like to say thank you to Mark Fellows for the excellent health advice all along the way and the calm manner in which you have given that at all times, even when closing Beatty Park Leisure Centre. Think about the history and where we've come and the fact that we no longer feel the need for these meetings right now. It is really quite something. There's been a lot of work behind the scenes, a lot of deadlines that have been very difficult to meet, but the team has raised up every time to meet them, and it's just been a fantastic response. So I also know that this has created additional workload in terms of agenda preparation, etc. But I think the model has worked really well, that this idea of having a strategy document that's responsive and live and updated regularly, that's really provided that organisational wide coordination has been very successful. And I think these meetings have been able to be quite agile. As Councillor Gontaszewski says, we haven't had briefings as we are now accustomed to in our council meeting cycle, and we've been able to deal with issues as we go quite well. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to everyone around the table and to administration for this point that we've reached, and for what I'd say is a pretty successful wrap up and transitioning the economic rebound plan over to council proper. Long may we never need these committee meetings. Thanks everyone. General business. Does anyone have any general business to raise? Okay, we have no confidential items. We have no next meeting. So that just brings me to the closure of the COVID committee meeting at 1:36 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance. See ya.